That's what.
Efren was.
I
Efren.
don't know if Efren's coming today.
Oh, everyone just immediately started joining.
Yeah, I think they were waiting for us because I got caught up in programming that I like forgot what time it was until I looked at the clock. Hello, everyone. We'll be starting in just a moment. Let me just make the ping. Then we're good to go. Oh, Efren is here. Let me turn. Yeah, we can hear you. I'll turn on your badge as well on the stream. Just do a ping, let everyone know.
Push the talk because I'm at my parents' house right now and it might get loud.
Okay. All right. So, Dervar, I guess give it a minute, and then let's just get started. Let's see. I guess I'll get a GIF ready for the Apache guns as well. If I can post that in the channel. Someone's dying in the background coughing.
I'm using throat lozenges.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, just go ahead and start. We're already running over anyway. Dervar.
Fair enough. Welcome everyone to this week's podcast. Well, roundup. Today we have Robert and Efren.
Yay! I'm the project director / lead programmer, and then Efren, I guess introduce yourself.
I'm Efren, the level designer and 3D modeler.
Okay. So earlier on, Robert, you and I were talking about testing the Hydra missiles. Well, the new rebuild.
Oh, Dervar, you're coming in and out.
Am I? Hang on.
Yeah, you'll suddenly low for a second, and then you'll be high. Am I the only one?
Is that better? I may have bumped my
That's
game.
better. That's better.
What was I? Oh yeah, we were talking about earlier about the Apache and the new Hydra missiles that you're doing.
Yes. Let me grab a GIF. I've been basically rewriting our entire weapon system for vehicles. So then that way it's a little bit more modular, so it's easier to just plug and play weapon platforms. The idea is to make it very easy in the future to add like Wilbur weapons and Black Hawk weapons. That's something that's been commonly requested, and we've wanted to add that for the longest period, so it's a stepping stone for us. I kind of been working on that for the past week and a half because there's a lot of code to tear out, redo, and test, and just make sure that all the old systems work. And then on top of that, making sure we're setting up the right foundation and running it through all the different people that are involved in that process to make sure they have a say in terms of how things are being done. And then just generally just like, okay, let's make these changes. Let's do it like this, and just kind of test it. So I finally got, it to a point where I'm happy and it does properly shoot the missiles and whatnot. So now it's just a matter of just I want to add a little more system that's related to like a weapon loadout system. So then that way we can slowly but surely, while we're doing this, we're slowly but surely kind of pushing towards having the ability of having secondaries, having knives. So I'm kind of using this as an excuse. Yes, it takes a little bit longer, But long term, people will benefit more because they'll have more tactical choices in terms of how they, are able to take on a situation. Because it's generally the same inventory system, the same way we spawn weapons. So I'm just kind of divvying it up, adding that loadout system. So there's like an array of weapons that like the Apache always spawns with. There's an array of weapons that the Hummer always spawns with, or like whatever else we bring down the line, like an Abrams. So it would know to spawn with its main cannon and a 50 cal. But if you're using that system and applying it to like an assault, it would know, okay, his starting weapon for an assault is always the M4. Then it's whatever standard issue pistol we decide to give them, and then whatever melee weapon we give them. And that allows us a very easy way of like, okay, let's decide to give the assault this melee weapon, let's give the snipers this melee weapon. It allows us that kind of like really easy approach to just tweak it and manipulate it. And because they're all using the same general proportions, I mean, a knife, a baton, all these things, we can generalize them of how they stab, how they do their motion. It makes it very easy to switch these things out, especially since we have a mocap suit. That's what I've been working on, which is why it's taken so goddamn long, because it's been basically just making sure that, like, as we're doing this, we're doing like 2 or 3 other things that are just kind of, when it comes out the other side, it'll be a lot better for putting the time in. Yeah, so that's that. Did you want me to talk about anything else I've been working on, or just that?
Well, you covered the melee weapons for the units, correct? You just covered that as well.
Yeah, just briefly. I just kind of talked about that. I mean, because you figure we've wanted to add melee weapons for the longest period of time, and this is like a slow little like incremental just progress in that direction. Because the operator was our first test with that, is in the first person. Is that we're like, okay, this would actually, we've programmed it so it would work in the first person and work in the RTS aspects. But it was more so just them understanding inventory and understanding switching and everything else. So essentially, we've started to set that foundation by just improving the helicopters. Here, I'm about to post a GIF of the new FARS system, FFARS, for the helicopters. They can basically fire missiles. So I'll post that in the podcast text channel and probably do a ping later tonight, so people know that, like, oh look, they put that system in. Let me just edit it and I will post that. Anyway, back to you, Durvar.
So you were talking to me earlier about Michael redoing the characters, such as Chelsea and her lieutenants and Winters and whatnot. So how is that going as a whole? Like, what are they going to look like? Are they going to be hyper realistic? Are they going to be? So how is? Because I haven't really been
hyper realistic. So the goal, well, you even cut it out, but the goal has been to make them hyper realistic in terms of basically like looking at armor, looking at like armor is the biggest thing we kind of look at for graphics is just like how much detail do they put in their vehicles into their units. So we've re-exported out some of the lieutenants to make it a little more photorealistic recently. Those are kind of snuck in the last couple of updates. Chelsea and Winters are being worked on next. The male and female assault will be switched out ideally probably in a week or so because the assault has the most weapons to boot. So he'll take a little bit longer. And then Michael's doing the medic right now. Do we have a picture of the medic? I think let me grab a picture of the medic that Michael's been working on, and I will post that in the channel. So we were just kind of going down the line and just kind of cleaning them up and just seeing what we could do to just kind of make them look a little bit more finalized. Some of them will get some more tweaks in the future, as our budget allows, to basically just kind of like, improve upon their visuals and just keep up to date in terms of like what the engine can physically do and what computers can handle based off our minimum spec. But yeah, so he's been pretty intently just kind of cracking away at that, and then rather working with Reillusion to just make sure that like the program's working and just kind of them giving us support, because I mean we kind of push that program to its limit sometimes in terms of like our, just generally the complexity of our characters. But yeah, sorry, back to you, Dewar.
Yeah, that's right. Efren, how are you going so far with San Francisco North? That's something I've been curious about.
Starting to push into Grid 4. Oracle Park area, and then down to Chase Center from there.
You have
Hoping to
pictures? They won't know what that is.
Oh man, I am not at home right now, so I can't post.
Did you
any.
commit it? I can take a picture for you.
Yeah, everything's committed.
I'll commit it. I'm sorry, I'll update it and then I'll post it in the channel for the listeners in the room.
Thank
Just
you.
give me a keep going. Sorry.
At the moment, taking time to do some cleanup work, taking all the blockouts from Grid 1 and Grid 4, taking them into 3D Max, clean up the meshes a little bit further, correct the orientations on them because, Unreal has a lot of great tools and stuff, especially for blocking out, but once you convert them to static meshes, it completely jacks up the orientation on the pivots. So need to take them into Max, orient them to the actual meshes themselves, re-import those, and then rearrange them on the map because they're going to be a little skewed off their original pivot. And then doing the work of just keep going and well, this time I'm going to be doing that as I go, exporting, cleaning up, and then re-importing and so on, because those are going to, all the gray blockouts you see on the map right now are basically the footprints or just the bare bones geometry for what's going to go there with the procedural building generator. I'm going to use those blockouts as like guides for the generator, and that'll really speed up the process, which in our case is great because we're getting close to the deadline, and I still want to make the deadline as much work as there is to do. I think we might go a little over, but I'm trying to speed things up to get it going. Also started plugging our custom meshes into the Snappy Roads tool and playing around with that. So, in the future, we have a much faster way of working and laying out these maps. But I mean, it's coming along. It's going to be a nice chunk of map to play with once we get all the good stuff in the game, like, the civilian management and the factions and then finally co-op. I've been building the map with a lot of like co-op in mind and trying to implement more areas for third person playability, like something where like a parking garage, you might need somebody to pop into third person to go under there and clean it out or check it out, see what's in there. And just stuff like that, trying to make a more diverse uh, variation of places where players can post up their bases or or set up civilian camps or what have you, just trying to make the whole game as a whole more more inviting.
Married?
I mean, a lot of people, yeah,
Oh,
just it's going to look badass. I think we're going to have a lot more for people to play on, and I really think and I really hope people like it.
and we'll have
Yeah.
a period of time for you guys to test it coming up at closer to October, where you guys can jump in and you guys can play it on experimental, where essentially it's like, okay, like let's test it out. Let's see how we like the new space that's been added, because I figure um, our goal has been to get it in for the Halloween update, because quite a bit is coming in for the Halloween update, and it's been about basically just kind of like, okay, like let's just kind of stretch it and see if we can get that in at the time period. But that's why I was saying like there's a chance that the San Francisco North could be a little bit after Halloween, but it just kind of depends on like the play testing, the texturing, and just it's really just gathering the feedback, because you figure the biggest thing is he's trying to basically push the diversity of the buildings. So it's not like I've seen that table here, here, and here. So, it's about basically just kind of stretching that out and basically adding unique assets where needed every couple of blocks. Anyway, back to you, Durvar. I'm still getting the picture, so bear with me.
Yeah, that's all right. So we were also talking about earlier, if you're not too distracted either, about the new early game. How is that coming along?
So, as it stands, we have it in on, I think it's like 2 people that can play it, Suki and one other person that asked me in DMs. But and then I played it, and Michael played it quite a bit. Is the new early game, where essentially you start a game, the deploy screen will be going away, and you just start the carrier, and you're basically like, okay, where's Chelsea? Like, where do I want to start? How do I want to play the game this time? And essentially, you have to look at like there's like little news feeds that just kind of come through of like grisly murders in X, Y, and Z, people missing or disappearing in grid, blah blah blah. And the idea is that it's supposed to basically incentivize you to get out there and send your drones, send your scout teams out, look at all the information of where Chelsea has been and where she's going to where she's going to build. Because one of the biggest parts of feedback that we got was the game's too quick. It goes to 11 right out the get-go, and there's no escalation, there's no pacing. So for us, it's been basically like, okay, let's take a step back, and let's have it to where like, okay, now the virus actually starts when you're there. So it's kind of going in towards that. Now there's going to be an actual progression of the zones. There's going to be a progression of Chelsea. She'll start out randomly in the world. She'll explore the world in the first 5 minutes or so and get an idea of where she wants to set up camp, where she wants to build, where she feels the most defensive. As she's exploring, she'll slap people to infect them and just generally cause chaos in those zones. So you can track her via the news feed and kind of get an idea of where she's going, what she's doing, and where she finally sets up camp based off of like you'll start to get consistent news feed information of like, oh, there's a bunch of murders that keep occurring in this zone. That's probably where Chelsea is. Let me go look for her. And then you fast forward about like 2 or 3 minutes, going towards like the 5 to 8 minute mark is when she like, she puts up her hive, she starts infecting, she starts basically like, setting up her encampment, putting up the defense pods, setting up defensive walls, and just basically spreading out in every direction from that zone. Then by probably around the 8 to 10 minute mark, she'll pop out her first lieutenant. That lieutenant will be one of two things. He'll either get pressure off of her or lead a group to break out and spread somewhere else. So think of them as like commanders, generals, whatever, basically, like kind of taking a vein from Colonel Burton from Command and Conquer, but they're just more of like for security or protection, or from like Age of Empires, the heroes that you would have, where it's probably more so Battle for Middle-earth 2. So those lieutenants are like, they'll be able to be like brought back to lead forces and to help Chelsea in dire need when she's like, or when her chips are down, if they die later in the game. But at the same time, they'll be able to lead forces and give you a run for your money. So if you've encircled her and you found where she is via those news reports, they'll launch an attack on your compound with the goal to completely get you to break off, leave them alone, retreat, go somewhere else, or maybe kill you if you're not paying attention if you brought Winters along. And essentially, it'll be up to you to be like, okay, like, they just spawned Lieutenant. They just launched an attack with Juggernauts and some standard infected and some spitters. I can't hold this. I'm gonna have to retreat. Or when we get into civilian management of the factions, they'll have to come in and help you in some regard. So they'll be more helpful in these situations as well. That's why we've kind of done this in layers. Where it's like, okay, we need to do early game. We need to get Chelsea where she needs to be, get the base for her, and then do the civilians, and then do the factions, because they're all gonna like domino. They're all gonna combine to make this like full simulation of the city, and everything just kind of coming undone based off of like what Chelsea does, what they do, what you do. So that's the general idea, and that's what we're pushing for, to basically just kind of have you be able to play either tonight or tomorrow. Worst case, it might be Saturday morning if there's a couple of things I have to hold, because there's a couple of bugs or other things that are affecting the build. So that would be the goal, is to basically like, that's going to be one of the major things that you'll be able to play test and kind of give your feedback on experimental going into the weekend. Yeah. Did I miss anything there, Var?
I think so. No, not that I can think of from when we were talking earlier. Oh yes, we also talked about having the just random events happen. Random news reports such as car crashes, things like that.
Right.
What
So
would the
Duravar
community
was
think about that?
suggesting. Yeah. So when we get to the AMA section of this, you guys are welcome to give us your opinions on this, or just in Twitch chat, or just message me on Discord, whatever. But one thing that we were looking at doing is making it to where you have to know how to read the news feed. So like you have to know, look for keywords. People being killed, people being kidnapped, people disappearing. Like you would know, okay, that's something associated with Chelsea. But there would also be some like filler, so then that way, like, you're looking through it and it's like car crash here or like robbery here. So then it's like, okay, like I actually have to pay attention to the feed and be like, okay, I kind of get an idea of what's going on here or what's going on there. And then once you learn the keywords or what's going on, you can use that information to your benefit to laser focus and like, oh, this is where Chelsea is. Everything else is just, you know, frivolous. It doesn't matter. I'm not here for that. I'm here to find the lieutenant. I'm here to find Chelsea and where they're spreading. So that was something that Duravar was telling to me before we joined the AMA. And I was like, well, fuck it. Let's just see what people think. I like the idea. It sounds interesting. And it gives more simulation to the world because then that can tie into where we get later on in the cards. Then we can have like those dynamic events tied into those. So you can get a report somewhere, be like, oh, like random civilians are rioting in this area, that you would know to show up there, maybe like, scoot them up and get them to one of your camps, maybe. So that could be an interesting thing that we could tie into later on. But for right now, it's just like text that just tells you it's simulating things that are happening in a zone. But anyhow, sorry, back to you, Durvar.
Yep, that's right. Honestly, that's all I've got for my question.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
couldn't really
So
think
then,
of any
do you want to
others.
open it up?
Yeah, let's open it up to the community and see what everyone has to ask and say.
Okay. Let me just pull up podcast questions.
So Shaggy asks, any chance for Angel Island to be connected again once infection is forced to start, either there or Treasure Island, and cannot cross over?
That's something we're looking at fixing before we basically like fully go into 1.2. Is that's one of the last things we're going to do for the new early game. Is that we're going to figure out a way for the infected to be able to traverse that area so they can actually like give you some kind of challenge. Likely it will be either just a quick little block out transport unit they can go across the water, or it will be their ability to swim. That's something myself and Derek have talked about, and it's like we know that if you start on Angel Island, you're kind of safe, you're protected. But at the same time, we're trying to get the game to a point where it doesn't matter. Like if you give that much land to Chelsea, if she takes that much, you're in for like an hours long engagement, just literally fighting block to block to block, based off of the sheer numbers that she can bring to counteract the amount of money you're farming from that island. That's something else that we were talking about in terms of ways to counter that. And it's about looking at the balance of the game to kind of figure out, like, okay, let's say you do decide to turn on that island. Great. Good luck taking the rest of the world. Is the biggest thing, is figuring out like how can we combat that. And that'll be one of the things that we're going to look at in terms of like combating that. So if you do decide to go off and for whatever reason you get a lucky feed and Chelsea does not spawn on Angel Island, you're home free. But I hope you're setting missions into the islands to basically like, at least constantly to keep her advance slowed down, and you're using that more as like a resource base, and all your main units are in the actual city. And then again, that'll come down to Leviathan and the tunneling and all that we plan on doing. So those are things that we're thinking about. We're aware of that people are exploiting it, and when we get to that point, ideally before we move fully into 1.2, as one of the last things with civilian management. Or sorry, not civilian management, but for the new early game, we'll address that. Let's see.
So we've got another question from Ice Money. If you want that one.
Hit me with it.
Yep. With the dynamic events, will the world actually be populated? Can I drive around and see mobs of civs, factions, zombies, or will it remain as only a few spawn per area? That's it.
So when it comes to that, we briefly covered this last week. But essentially, what I want to do is I want to integrate what the Matrix demo calls their mass entity plugin module, whatever you want to call it. And the idea is that you're able to simulate cars and people driving around, walking, doing their life, sitting down on benches. And then we just set a limit on how many can spawn so we don't blow up people's computers. I think the Matrix demo has like 100 or so people in their entire world. So ultimately we'll be limited by like the minimum spec to make sure that people don't get different experiences, and maybe we can make it to where people can like turn it up if they really want to, if they don't care about the performance implications of spawning more ambient civilians in the world. But that is something that I'm personally working on, while Derek takes more of finishing up the actual automation and some of the edict stuff this month. I'll be working on the mass entity, working on the cars and the people that are going to just basically, I've been playing a lot of Red Dead and GTA games like that, and figuring out like how can I simulate these ambient AI that essentially can give more life to the world and can interact with you, the infected, and factions to a very basic degree, so it feels more like a living, breathing city. That's what 1.2 for me is more about, is the civilians and just the city itself, and getting it to where it needs to be to get it ready for like when Pierce and Natalie show up at 1.2. So that's the ambient civilians, that's the dynamic civilian groups, it's the policies and edict stuff, so you can better control and better get evacuations going, so it's not as cumbersome as it is now. And then the intake automation system as well. It's like you can, when people walk up to your compound, you don't have to babysit them. The system will just be like, oh, you're civilian. It's based off the information we know. You do this, you go here, you do that, and it automatically gives them move orders based off of like what you have set in your ROE. But that's the whole 1.2 is just in its entirety, just all that. Let me see. Oh, back to you, Derivar.
Yep. Asterix 13 asks, have you considered investigation phase? Maybe in the beginning, Chelsea is self-cordoned or cordoned for the first. Cordoned. Oh,
sorry,
that's that. Yeah, that's right. No, I couldn't figure it out.
No, you're fine.
For the first 4 to 8 days, and can be triggered after Lieutenant Winters interacts with the investigation sites, acting as triggers, finalizing with an all-out assault, establishing a zombie beachhead in any of the regions except where CERC buildings occupy.
So that is the entire focus of the new early game, is adding that whole investigation stage, where it's like you don't know where Chelsea is, she doesn't know where you are, and she's learning how powerful she is and what she could do, and you're learning, if you're more so trying to track her down and choose the right base. So like, because the biggest thing is that like you didn't really have time to think, you didn't really have time to kind of like build a base, take it all in, and be more creative in terms of where you chose to build, because it was just go, 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 go the moment the game started, and there was no chill. So that is the new early game in my mind, is that investigation stage. And to me, what Derivar was suggesting about adding some more like filler news reports that you have to know which ones are relevant to you and which ones aren't, is towards that front, where it's like the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game, up to like 5 minutes, is just you trying to figure out where you want to build and where you think Chelsea's going to settle, or maybe you just wait till she does settle. You fly nearby and you're like, okay, she's here. She's infected these zones. I'm going to run through and clean up the zones that she's basically like infected on the way here, that are like minor infections that are really easy to clean up. And then once I clean up those areas, I'm going to head straight to her and entrench her, or basically like, encircle her and prepare for her lieutenants to spawn when she gets that powerful or whatever. So I mean, realistically, to me, that is the investigation stage. And when you play it going into this weekend to next week, I'd be highly keen to kind of hear what you think towards the investigation that we added in there. So then that way I can get some feedback of like, well, I think this is too much, or this is too little, or blah, blah, blah. So that's a very important thing going into this weekend, going into next Thursday, is I want to hear what you guys have to say going into experimental this weekend. So then that way we can make the meaningful changes we need to do immediately, so we can get into civilians sooner. But yeah, back to you, Dermar. Oh wait, is it the question on Twitch? Don't forget about that. You want me to read it?
Yeah, oh yeah, I didn't even see that. Yeah, sure.
I got you. I got it on the laptop. Okay, so it says, are there any plans to expand the civilians and evacuation gameplay to make the player unit population? Okay. So population will be revised and looked at after factions and civilian management at the end of 1.3 for CERC. Once we know how many resources the resources that we have left, and making sure that minimum spec computers can always hit at least 60 frames. So CERC population, we're aware. We're gonna get that. We're gonna hit it once we know just how much simulation we can do in the city and how much we need to give to CERC to make sure they have the resources available to them, or players have the resources that are available to them to make sure they can play the game correctly. Going into your first question about civilian management, yes, we'll be adding in an edict system where if you own a zone, you could tell everyone to leave that zone and go to another zone you own. And then basically they'll form a Congo line to get to your helipads to evacuate. If you're just moving them to make no man's land, you can do that as well. And you can basically just move everyone from one zone to another zone. If you want to take zones that you think you're going to lose to Chelsea, and you basically just want to like deny her the resources, or you plan on getting them all to one island and then evacuating them over time. So we're calling it like an edict system where you can click on a zone and you can just click on a little box over it, and then you'll be able to say like, everyone evacuate, go to this zone right now. You have like 10 minutes, and then a zone will just start to empty over that time and go into another. And then we plan on adding automation. So that's part of 1.2 as well. Somewhere towards the middle to end, we'll basically be adding it in so that you can basically like, it'll intake civilians. It'll figure out, go to euthanization, go to the hold, go to the cages based off of ROE settings, instead of you having to sit there and predicate everything, or rather set everything. And then that way we'll set it up to the point where auto evacuations occur. You don't have to do anything. So let's say, for instance, you set up a corridor where you're moving all the civilians from the front line to the back of Presidio, the Western Treasure Island area. You can have a helipad set up in an open area, have everyone set in the first 3 zones to evacuate to the back one. And then you could have it to where basically like the ROE says that once they when they're clean, or like just immediately move them to a Chinook, and the Chinook will automatically fly them to the aircraft carrier, and you don't have to do anything. That's the major goal going into 1.2, is you could do the civilian evacuation of saving people, and you don't have to do anything. It just does it for you. You just set the rules up, and then it just works. So that's one of the major bullet points for 1.2. Somewhere towards the middle to the end, because the priority going into civilian management is get the dynamic civilian groups functional, get the ambient civilians going, and then it's rescuing automation as the ending parts of 1.2. I think that's all for Twitch. Okay, back to you, Derivai. Pick a question.
Yep. John Connors 74 asks, is dynamic building with the factions and what you guys may have brainstormed?
Dynamic building with the factions.
Dynamic buildings with the factions.
Does it mean, are you guys talking? Are you talking about basically them placing down dynamic structures like the infected now do, where they're not prefabricated structures that just there, that are always in the same location? Is that what you're getting at? I think that's what John Carter is asking. So as it stands right now, I completely breezed over this. Well, I kind of did it technically, but essentially we're setting up the foundational piece in civilian management. Is that one of our artists has been working on a system, a blueprint-based system, where it will dynamically generate camps based off of the geometry, the geography of an area. So we tell it, hey, generally we're going to generate one group per zone, so it doesn't become too crowded. And then if we decide based off of feedback of you guys that we could do 2 or 3 dynamic groups per zone based off of resources, then we might do that as well. But we're going to do one group per grid that you can capture. That group will, over time, say, I want to build a camp there. So then they'll go to that area, and then it will just populate a camp. It'll just look at the area. I'm gonna put a tent there, put a wall here, put a fire pit there, like that kind of stuff is what we plan on doing for the dynamic civilian groups. That way, every time you play, we're running different variations of like civilian groups that have just kind of set up an intersection, like a T section, a four-way, a one-way, alleys. So that way, there's some variance for replayability, especially depending on how defensible they are, and especially if they're hostile or friendly to you. So that's the idea that we're going for them, for dynamic civilians, because those are sub-factors of what we call the dynamic civilian groups. When you're talking about Pierce and Natalie, Pierce will ideally mirror the same system, but he'll be more police-oriented, so he'll use a lot of like mobile command vehicles, like the SWAT vehicles. We have a lot of concept that we've collected, or art references that we've collected for like, basically think of like bank robbers, where you have like the command vehicles and they have those little like the division, they have those little towers, like the observation towers and all that. We're looking at that and we're like, okay, that's what Pierce is going to use for his buildings, where it's going to be like, those command tents, those command RVs and all those things that unpacked and all that stuff. So think of Pierce as the British from Company Heroes 1, where they're mobile, but they have a bite. Like they're like, if you could get them all to an area and build an army, you could really lay it into someone. Especially since they're very mobile. There's very few of them, but they're mobile and they have pack a punch. And then Natalie is more like cloak and dagger, GLA, gonna hide in the buildings, like the hollow. There's like 10 or so hollowed out buildings in our game. He's gonna hide in plain sight. Is the idea of the deviation of how we're breaking up the factions. But keep in mind, factions are coming in 1.3, and that's projected for us to try and get Pearson before Halloween. But at this point, it might bleed over a little bit past Halloween, but we're doing our damnedest. We have to just get over this hurdle of new early game, 1.2, civilian management, everything I talked about before, and then it's Pierce, and then it's Natalie. That pretty much it. Pretty sure I'd answer your question. But yeah, sorry, back to you, Durfon.
Yeah, that's right. What Shaggy asks, what is in Chelsea's unusually large bags? Quite sure for that one.
I'm not really sure about that one. She has large bags?
What I've seen.
Maybe take a picture. Now I'm curious what you're talking about. Maybe I'm not understanding what you're talking about.
Maybe maybe they're talking about the big pods that she builds.
Well, he just take a picture and then post it, and I'll be able to answer that. The next one.
Yeah. Ice Money asks, can we please get an extension on the range of the operator? Maybe the radio op can place placeable radio beacons to extend his range. Would sort of act like the power pylons. If you want coverage for an area, you will chain them together throughout the map. Or maybe the engineers can build radio stations.
Oh. I'm going to steal that idea. Hold on. Copy and pasted. Totally not going to steal that. I didn't know that even came up. I didn't know that people wanted the radio operator looked at. So, just to give you a rundown of, I need to do... So I'm finishing up the helicopter thing tonight. This the what I was talking about previously. And then I was going to work on AMD Fidelity thing, that they released a new FSR thing, and NVIDIA DLSS. Then I was going to do the ambient civilians. So either while I'm doing the ambient civilians, I'll look into that, because I still got to squeeze in the mortars. I want to nerf the mortars so they have ammo, and I want to make them so they auto fire like in Company Heroes. So I'm going to squeeze that in along everything else. So so I have those three things. What's mostly going to take up most of my time this month is auto firing mortars, the ambient civilians. And then I'll look into the radio operator guys of Michael and see if we can see how it feels, see if we can extend them. Because for the longest, I've wanted to look at the command trucks and expanding their radius, because I feel like when you put down a command truck, their build radius is too restricting, especially considering you own the whole damn zone and you have to build within a small circle of the first Humvee tent you put down or where you capture it. So I'll put a bullet point in that. I copied and pasted that, and I put it in my notes. So that's something that I'll come back to, and you're welcome to bring it up if you have any other suggestions or ideas towards that in the future. But yeah, just I'll keep a note on that one. Back to you, Durvar.
Okay. Shaggy, what will stop us from flying a helicopter around San Francisco, San Fran, to find her faster? Hang on. Skyping the Skyping the investigation part. Oh, skipping the My buddy, really? Investigation part bag question photo in podcast text. Skyping.
Sniping. He means sniping. Skipping. Whatever. Yeah. So you're talking about Shaggy's question at 435?
Yeah.
You can do that. But I mean, you figure she'll just jump. If she just randomly jumps on your helicopter and kills everyone, it's not my fault. So the idea is that, like, with the investigation thing, we'll be getting rid of the circles. So it's not going to be like, haha, she's there. I just need to stay out the circle or she won't kill everyone on board. So it's going to be more like, okay, like, fly. Oh, everyone's dead. Well, time to go home, guys. So, like, that's the thing, though. Theoretically, we roll when the chopper crashes. So there's a chance that, like, most of them will survive, but you're playing with fire at that point. So it's like, you know, you want to kind of, this is how I imagine it's going to go down. And it'll come down to playtesting and what you guys run into. Is that it's going to be like, hey, she's in this area. I'm going to put a base here. I'm going to start to explore out. Send some scout choppers out, the little drone choppers that we have. Send some assaults out. Get a feel for the area, and hunter and tracker on the ground, or hunter and tracker in the air with, like, the scout drone, because she can't. I don't know if most people don't realize this, but she can't actually jump on the scout chopper. It's too high up in the air. Because a non-combatant, we left that one alone. Unless you somehow glitch it and get it lower to the ground, which, as far as I know, I haven't seen anyone be able to do that. So. Yeah, that's the thing. So you could that kind of like counters it of like, okay, let's get a CERC tent down nearby. Let's get a chopper up. Let's scout. Let's figure out how I'm gonna play. Let's figure out how I'm gonna tech into the tree, and just give you some more breathing room. Essentially, is how I figure that would go. But I mean, I might be wrong. It might come down to playtesting. We figure out people exploit the shit out of it, and we're gonna have to pivot a little bit. But I won't know until I just see how people play, and then we just course correct based off of what's needed. Back to you, Durvar.
Well, about the scout helicopter not being able to be jumped on. If you land it and then get it to go up again for a split second, there they can actually jump on.
You can do it. Yeah, it's based off altitude. They do a distance check. So, like, theoretically, that just comes down to you. Like, you know, like, if you're gonna land, I don't know why you'd land it because that can't bring on units. So you figure, like, I think that comes down to the strategy of it is, like, just make sure your helicopter isn't low to the ground. But I mean, we'll have to play test it and see how it feels. Let me take some pictures of what efforts we're working on, and I'll start posting that. I've been, like, taking an eon to get these pictures for you guys.
Yeah, that's right.
Back to you, Jeremiah. Sorry. I'll put him in podcast text.
Anyone got their hand up? No one's got their hand up.
Yeah, no one wants to talk about voice. We're scary.
That's fair enough. Yeah, we're terrifying. We're monsters. John Connor 74 asks. John Connor 74 asks, with Patient Zero having to settle down and start the infection, how will the factions develop over time? Will there be a police faction right off the bat that might slow down Patient Zero at the start?
Yes, that's exactly what we're planning on. Where basically we want to feed in the personalities. Where it's like Pierce will be like, okay, like it's gonna be like, I guess I keep pulling this comparison for like Resident Evil 2, like when the movie, where basically like the police are trying to like stem the bleeding, they're trying to like exert their power and like try and help as many people as possible. So the idea is we want to have an escalation as Chelsea like settles down. They'll respond as well as you're responding, and you'll be like, "Oh, look, it's the police. Oh, they're all dead." Like, you know, like that kind of thing. So it's like you could actually like go around the world and just watch them do stuff. Like they'll actually, because the idea that everyone's fighting Chelsea, it's not just you. It's just dynamic civilian groups. It's Pierce. It's Natalie. No one's allied with her. So, you know, the whole goal is to simulate that when you're not there, so you can hear it in the background. But when you have eyes on, the police will try and run in and save civilians. They'll be mostly futile. They're gonna get wrecked, but it's still gonna be like they'll have their small victories and they'll have their, they'll have their victories and they'll have their failures ultimately when it comes down to it, and it'll just be like different every time you play is what we're going for. But yeah,
That's fair. Is that it for that question?
I think I got it.
Okay. Shaggy asks, any plans for other map other map expansions after the San Francisco North? What is the end goal for the map?
The end goal for the map. Shit, I don't have that picture. The end goal of the map is actually I can just open up Google Maps. I don't have to like search through our drive and find all that. Is we want to round it out with a completion of the Bay Area. So I'll just take a picture of what I've talked about with the level designers, and I'll put it in the channel. So this kind of comes down if we get our way, if technology will allow, and we're not going to blow up people's computers. It would be ideally a landmass of what I just put in podcast text channel, where it's like you have northern San Francisco, you have Treasure Island, you have Angel Island, you have the area to the north of the Golden Gate where like the Planet of the Apes thing happened up there. I always refer to that movie for some reason, and then that would be the cutout right there. So you get a good little like you get a foresty region, you get some watery regions, you get like a full-on city, and going south of San Francisco, I mean, it'll kind of just depend. Like we want to get that box, and then we want to figure out can computers handle what we're doing going south. And it would stand to reason it would, because we're talking about like a year, 2 years. Technology is always getting better every 3 to 6 months, if not sooner. So it's like it just kind of comes, and it also comes down to the engine limitations because I think we're like the only ones in RTS game on the engine using it in the way we do because we're crazy. So it'll be like also just kind of pushing for the right technology to be implemented so we can like make sure everything's working because typically the Unreal Engine is used for shooters and third-person games, but it's great once you get into the nitty-gritty of like just customizing it. But yeah, so that's the gist of it, is ideally do that. And ideally, we've already done a good majority of it. It's the northern region wouldn't even take that long. It just comes down to doing it in bite-sized chunks. Because once we do San Francisco North, and then the next logical area would be is that build Alcatraz. It's a tiny little blip somewhere above Fisherman's Wharf. If you guys can't see it in that picture I posted, because then that will be another base that you can operate on, and take control of. Because we've kind of given up on making the pandemic story, and the pandemic is your story. How are you going to combat the virus on day one, and not just how is CERC going to do it with like their rule book of how they would do it. So then that way, like you make your own story, you explore the world, you figure out how you want to, what's ethical and what you're going to do ethically and what you're going to do non-ethically to kind of combat it. So that's why we've kind of like took away from like all the like stuff we used to say years ago, like we released in 2021, 2020, where it's like, what was a good example? That's not what CERC would do. Well, that wasn't fun. The story and gameplay, if it's gameplay versus story, gameplay should always win out in terms of giving players new ways of playing the game that are inventive, creative. And that way you make your own story. So that's the biggest thing that we've started to deviate from, is just to separate Pandemic from the campaign and make campaign its own thing, where it's like, this is what they actually did, and Pandemic is your story, what you're going to do, is how we kind of see it now going ahead. But yeah, that's that, Dervar.
So I must apologize for the last question. I was taking some medicine, and the shit makes me gag real fucking bad.
Okay.
It's disgusting. Anyway, with a variety of the new features, this new start style coming in, will you be adding more sliders for the custom menu?
Yeah, of course. It just comes down to requests. And it just comes down to requests. I mean, I've gotten some people that have asked me, and what they're playing right now for the two people that have been playing it, outside of the team, of like, hey, like we want more sliders if we want to make this harder. We want to make Chelsea start sooner. Because maybe some people, not everyone wants to wait for the entire investigation period. Maybe they just want her to go bucko crazy in the first couple of minutes, and they want to get that really hard, like, what's the word? Sweaty gameplay. So I'm all for accommodating both. It just comes down to, like, we need people to tell us what they want. Because I don't want to a mind reader. So that's why we want as many people playing the experimental going into this weekend to next. They can tell us, like, I don't like this. I want to be able to customize this. I think that this should be customizable. So that way we can look at it and be like, okay, that's easy. Yeah, we'll just tweak some values. We'll expose that to a custom game options, add it to the game instance. We're groovy. Now you can tweak these values that you feel are too slow for you, that are, like, accommodating for maybe newer people. So yeah, I'm totally for custom game options. It's just more so just kind of letting us know what you want to add there. Maybe we should add a tag to the suggestions website, so that way we can be like custom suggestions for custom game, like, settings or whatever. I don't know, because I know some people have wanted, like, a walk only mode or, like, no special infected mode, so that way they can simulate playing like original zombies that can't run, and playing it where, like, they it's just there's no special infected. So that way they can, hey, if you want to have fun, dish your own. In terms of basically just we set the sandbox up, and then at that point we shove you in front in the sandbox, lock the door, and run away. And then it's up to you to kind of figure out, like, how do you want to play and all that stuff, and customizing it. So yeah, I'm all for that. Just tell us, and if we miss something, tell us again, because we figure there's a lot of people that talk on Discord, on Reddit, on Twitch, YouTube. We miss stuff. We're humans. So that's the biggest thing. Don't get dispersuaded if I don't say something immediately or someone else doesn't reply back. We've probably missed it in the grand scheme of things. We do the best we can, but sometimes we miss stuff or we forget things. But just throw that out there for someone that's, like, an idea to give us, and we don't bring it up for a while or whatever. Anyway, back to you, Durvar.
Yep. Sky Patrol 21 on Twitch asks, any plans to create a survey for the things you're unsure what players want?
Well, okay, so that's a good thing that you bring up there, but I feel like the best way forward for that is our suggestion note board. So we need to do a better job of promoting that. We need to integrate it into the main menu or in the options, because we have a suggestion feedback website that Suki, one of our moderators, manages. And essentially it's like, okay, just write out whatever you want. Riot Shields came from that. The small came from that board. There's been so many things that have come from that board. Death animations came from it. There's probably at least 8 to 10 things that we've pulled off of that board, because we literally, what we do is, like, every couple of weeks we look at that board and we look to see what's most upvoted, and we're like, oh, well, we have some free time. Let's throw someone in a corner to go prototype that because they can't do anything else right now. He's a modeler. Let's get some backlog stuff done. The towers, that was something that came from that. Is that the medium Atlas Tower, the light tower, and eventually the heavy tower were from a suggestion on that website, where it was like, okay, like, our model is free. Let's go have model something to, like, get that up and done. So when we had the time to program it, it's already ready to go, and it's just day or two of just implementing it, testing it, getting it out there. So that's generally our preferred feedback, like, area. Discord suggestions are great, but sometimes they get buried. Very easily they get buried. So, like, I like that website. If you really, really have a good idea and you want it to be, like, publicly shown, voted on, searched, I would highly recommend you put it in the suggestion note page, because then it's there forever, and we can find it very easily. We can search it, and people can upvote your ideas. So that way we can know what the people want. What we can consider later down the road when the game's done, and we want to do, like, a full DLC on something, like, years down the road. We have the information, the data to make the right choices. But yeah, back to you, Durvar.
Okay. John Cotton 74 asks, possibility of an invasion type multiplayer, example Dark Souls or Deathloop, where a player can invade as either a small bandit faction or Fenrir. Edits 1, have a setting to turn off so if players don't want to be invaded. and edit to probably happening around the 3 to 7 plus day mark.
That's actually a really good idea.
That's actually a really good idea. I was actually most excited for this question.
I really like that idea, actually.
So do
Okay,
I.
so I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna copy and paste. That was on Twitch or that was on Discord?
Discord.
Okay, I'm gonna copy and paste that because like that would be something we would do as we get close to the verses. Because our first step out of everything, out of like going out of the year, going into Q1, Q4 of this year, Q1 of next year, is get the base co-op in, and then at that point decide if we're gonna push verses, which I don't see why we wouldn't. So that could be a cool little flag. Like even when you're, I think Resident Evil 6 had that. Resident Evil 6 had that. I think even Left 4 Dead has that, where people can like jump in and play as the infected, and just screw you over and then leave or whatever they want to do. Yeah, because that was always fun. Those games, but those are more shooters. But I've never seen that in the context of an RTS game, so that could be interesting. So I'll put a bullet point in that, and that's something that again, like, put that on the website. Yeah, actually put that on the website, for your adult website. So then that way other people can rally behind it, get excited about it, vote for it, and then we could be like, okay, like, because we're going to end up when we get to multiplayer, we search. Like I search tags, I search categories of keywords of like, what do they want for this? How do they think about these systems? So suggestion page. So yeah, please put that in there, and then that way it's on your account. People can vote for it, and we can see how it goes. But anyway, back to you, Durvar.
Yep. Asterisk 13. Actually, has anyone got their hand up before I continue? Nope. Asterisk 13 asks, as for the early warning systems, I think they're called tags. Can we get a vision bonus with them, like the thermal vision we used to have to see hidden enemies in the fog of war?
Tax. Oh, the tax, the TACS. Funny you bring that up. I think we mentioned this a couple AMAs ago, but I want to bring back thermal in a limited fashion, where it's like a scanning pulse, where they stay emanated for a couple of seconds in a small radial space, kind of similar to the idea of the thumper. It's like some kind of structure, some kind of like radio array you can build, and it basically just you hit a button and it pulses. And it lets you know infected are coming, like an early detection system. So I think They Are Billion has that too, actually. Yeah, they do. Where they have those little towers you can build that like it shows red icons on your mini map, so that you know they're coming. I forget the name of the structure for They Are Billion, so that's something that I want to look at again. Is some kind of cool particle effect for like pulsing an area. With like a more like souped up version of the tax sensor. The tax sensor was always meant for like very strategic placement. So ideally, this will kind of be what happens to the drone, like just the field turret, just to kind of diverge a little bit here. Is that ideally what I want to do? Because I want to put more emphasis on the classes. So like the tax sensor seems like something that would be more so like the sniper, and then like you figure that structure would be potentially what we replace for the engineer to build, where it's some kind of like pulsing structure that just kind of scans the area. Because it's something else I've wanted to push for. Like I want to give the field turrets. I want to take away the field turrets, add normal big turrets, like prototype turrets, 1 or 2 tiers of them, and then take away the field turrets to make those minions that the engineer can build in the field, like the alien turrets. Because originally they were supposed to be like aliens, like deployable turrets, like the second one, where basically like you set them up. They're quick point defenses. They're disposable. You get 2 or 3 of them, and they're like pets for children. Like they're like pets to the engineer. So that way, it incentivizes you to bring engineers into the fray. Basically, think TF2 for the engineers. Because the engineers need to be more of a combat unit, but they're not. They're squishy, but they're really useful. If you could protect them and get them a setup like emplacements like that. So those are things that we're looking at to basically just kind of flesh that out a little bit more and put more emphasis on the engineer, the assault, the sniper, the medic. They all have abilities, things they bring to the table. They just kind of diversify, like, okay, there's a reason why you bring these units into a combat engagement or keep them in the back or keep them, in an armored vehicle that you bring out only in the most dire situations. Because if a sniper pops your one radio operator and their entire attack is contingent on that, you know, you can keep them in the striker. And then at that point, they won't realize when he comes out and starts calling in airstrikes. It's like, oh, that's awkward, you know? So, like, that kind of level of strategy in terms of, like, each unit and what they add to combat. Back to you, Dermar, sorry.
Shaggy asks, what is going to be the limit with moving the entire population to another zone? Can we just move everyone onto the small power plant island, blow the bridge up, and oh my god, gas them?
What the fuck? I'm not even gonna answer that question.
That's fucking dumb.
You know, he's making me want to do. He's making me want to institute a limit on how many people you can move from another zone until they get mad and they rebel. So that way, like, if you move like, you know, 100,000 people into a zone that can only sustain 10,000 or 20,000, those excess people will keep getting mad. So eventually, like, if you're doing that, they'd rebel because you're not getting them out. So the idea is like a flow control of, like, people need to have somewhere to go. You need to be doing something with them. So like, you figure there has to be a pro and a con to moving them. So, like, otherwise everyone would just exploit it, like what you suggested. What the person that asked the question suggested. So thank you for letting me know about that.
It's just
totally not gonna add a pro and con now.
I mean, don't need to move civilians if there are none.
No comment. So we put that in there. It's again, it's a sandbox. How you guys want to play? It's all opportunities, all choices. So you figure that's how you want to play. Great. But, like, I'm definitely gonna put it. I'm gonna talk to Derek about instituting some kind of, like, if you go too high in a zone, people are gonna get pissed. Once it goes higher and higher and higher, and eventually they'll rebel or attack you in the people that are spawning in that zone. Unless you have a plan of, like, okay, we're constantly getting, like, you know, 500 people out every couple of minutes, so it's gonna counteract people that are getting mad because it's freeing up the population because there's Chinooks coming in, ferrying them off that zone constantly. Because in that way, like you guys are saying, they just move everyone to one zone, and then Chelsea can never win. But anyway, back to you, Dermar.
That's it. Ice Bunny asks, in regards to the new medic model, will the rest of CERC get camo options to match him, or is that camo just unique to the medic class?
Like I was telling Michael, I feel like if we made every character too similar, the readability would suffer. So the compromise is originally we were going to do them all the same camo, but then people that have accessibility issues, people that are zoomed out a little bit further, I feel like we need to have those distinction of colors, camo, like effects for every unit, just to make it easier on people. Don't get me wrong, there's still the icons, but it's just one extra thing that's helping people accessibility wise. I mean, again, there's always the possibility that people mod it and they just put everyone in the same camo, or we just end up adding an option ourselves. But in terms of resources, and based off of how much we have to do on the roadmap, they're just going to be the one-off, different colors, they're unique. And then in the future, if there's enough demand for it, if we have free time, we would address it, or we let the community address it by mods. Would be this. I think that's the most reasonable way to go about it. Because in the grand scheme of things, it's not like that important in terms of everything else we have on our plate. But I get it. You know, to the people that are more immersive, they're more like they want what it would be like in real life. Everyone has the right same camo. Everyone's matching. Everyone's, like, you know, camouflage based off of the terrain they're in. So I get it, but that's the counter argument. That's all I got there, Mark, for that.
Brilliant. Just a quick note to you, Robert. We've hit an hour. Do you want to take a few more questions and then call it, or how do you want to go about this?
Okay, I guess 3 more. Pick the 3 hardest ones you can find.
Okay, 3 hardest ones. Aga Medella, you've covered ways that we can evacuate the test subjects, but what kind of use will the non-infected be for those of us that side with Umbrella Corporation? I can always use more DNA points.
How is that the hardest one? You already know I'm going to answer to that.
I mean,
you're horrible. No problem. I mean, then that's your prerogative. Go play Umbrella. Go play Neo Umbrella, or whatever you want to do. Like ultimately, it's like it comes down to the whole sandbox aspect of the game, where it's like you can farm DNA of people that are infected, and even if they're not, like it's however you want to play it. That'll go into the automation. So if you want to do the thing, which I think you're thinking about doing via automation, you can. But just it comes down to how you want to play. So we're not going to limit that. We're not going to be like, oh no, you can't do that. But yeah, back to you, Tiff.
Yep. Ice Money. One of Ice Money's questions is: I'm sure you guys answered this before. Moving in the future as the game grows, instead of limiting it to lower end PCs or specs, why not move to more custom settings, like amount of AI on screen, amount of ragdolls, max population, lower graphic settings, etc.
I gotta read that again. Where is that one?
At
What's that question?
Fourth from the bottom from Ice Money. Give it time, but
Okay. I get it. Sorry, I had to just kind of think about that for a second there. So we're already doing that, but the idea is that we don't want to diverge experiences too much, because what happens when we introduce co-op? You know what I mean? The host has his settings tweaked all the way up for some of those settings. It's going to be miserable for anyone else joining. Unless we somehow write some kind of third-party thing where it's like, your computer's low end. You better be careful when you go into this game. It might melt. So, it's about basically, like, to us, finding acceptable ranges for, like, based off of, like, all computers. Minimum, high, whatever. Like, they're all the same. And the only difference is just the difficulty settings that dictate how many infected they spawn, their health, X, Y, and Z. I mean, you figure, because, like, historically the biggest cost has not been our video card, it's been the CPU. And CPU, because we do too much all the goddamn time. Like, there's things being ran in real time across the island, even though you have no business running those calculations, calculating that movement code. We just do it because it's more immersive, and it's theoretically, like, it's always accurate 1-to-1. So for us, it's been about virtualizing that, faking more of that. Of what's outside your realm of influence doesn't matter. Fake it until you're there. But that goes into the partition tool. It's one of the things that will be sure, and one of the things that we'll be pushing in 1.2 with the civilian management as a foundation thing is the partition. Is that we'll be slicing the world up into Skyrim type grids that dynamically stream based off of your player's camera. And with the dynamic groups and everything else, we're gonna compartmentalize, or like compact these AI, so that they're like when you're not in a grid. Think of it as like civilization. Actually, they'll be like, I think Kenshi does this as well. I mean, we've been doing some research into Kenshi to see what they do as well, to learn from them in other games. Is that they have almost like a path, a spline, and their units move along that spline when you're not looking. So they don't have to. So that way, like, when you look away, they get off the road and they travel on a preset path. And the idea is you can focus somewhere else where your camera is actually looking, and you can save resources, and you can simulate, like, oh, two generals just saw each other. Let's look at each group's health and everything else and figure out how this battle is going to go. That way, when you move your camera back, it's like, that guy got hurt, he's missing an arm, that guy's dead, and then you can take control of the battle if you have units there. Or if you don't have units there, it's just ambience in the background. We play gunshots, we do stuff like that. And that way we can push more to have more, you can have more going on in the world when we push systems like that. So that way, when we add San Francisco North, when we add these northern provinces above the Golden Gate, every grid is like, populated. Every grid is like, as lifelike as we can possibly get, based off of, like, we're able to, like, virtualize those areas and focus on where you can actually see, based off of the population that we allocate to CERC. That's our thought process. in terms of basically just kind of like handling the optimization, because I built a i7 fourth generation computer, a 1060 equivalent video card, and I tested it on a 960, and it works. I get 80 frames, 60 frames now, based off of what we've done already. On low to medium, global illumination has to be off because global illumination just nukes people's computers. It's basically a form of ray tracing. I turn it off even when I play, and I have a high-end computer because I just don't care. I want the frames. So, it's like that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, like we can just keep tweaking it, keep getting it to like, the minimum spec of like, because if we keep pushing those systems, where we can increase the amount of things that happen for the amount of pop factions can have when things are going on in your area, we can increase the population for CERC, by just like compacting and making those simulations of grids. So that's been a huge thing going into 1.2. It's like kind of behind the scenes, like we don't talk about it that much, but it's like the back end of making sure that like when we spawn these dynamic groups, Bob, Sally, and Joe across the world aren't taking up resources in terms of like each person is like, that guy's collecting garbage, that guy's drinking water, that guy's on a fire playing a guitar. No, they're turned off until you move closer. You move your camera near them. We spawn some generic sound effects so you can hear them to the fog of war. You move your units near, like next to them. We spawn the character. We add the AI, and then they're ready for play. Of like, you want to go over there and kill them? Great. You want to go over there and see and introduce yourself? Great. And it's like getting to that level of sophistication for our spawning and our simulation of the world is 1.2. So like I did a bad job of explaining like the world partition going into 1.2, but it's like I think it's required. It's like a foundational piece for us, and that was a huge thing that Unreal Engine 5 made available to us, is that like now we can make larger worlds and we can really push the limits of like simulating a city. But yeah, back to you, Durban. It's like 2 questions left, I think.
1.
Oh, hit me with it, because I gotta get back to the helicopter after this.
Yeah, that's right. Sky Patrol 21 asks, have you looked at the way Arma 3 Alive map does simulations? It might be something to look into.
No, I haven't, because so this might be bias on my side, but historically I've always like Arma has always ran terribly for me, so I've never like looked at it more for like how great the realism is and how great the simulation is. I love Arma, but like it still runs terribly to this day on my computer. So it's always been like it's an amazing game, but it's just like I don't know if they're the person we'd pull reference from. I think it would be more so like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead. It would be Kenshi, games like that, where it seems like they've gotten a good balance of graphics, performance, gameplay, and in having enough like their variance there to kind of keep you like busy. That's generally the way I've seen it. Now I'm not. I mean, there's always things to learn from other games, so maybe I'm wrong. And I need to take a closer look at Arma. It's just I always associate the performance with the overall performance of the game, and then I'm like, maybe I should go look at GTA or Red Dead or something. But I'll put it on my list of things to look into, because I don't know if the Arma team do that many devlogs or do that many like behind the scenes stuff.
They do.
So, they do. Oh, that's right. You follow them quite a bit.
I could follow them vigorously. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm going to bug the shit out of you then. Okay.
I've even spoken to some of the Bohemia developers, including their map creator.
Okay, so I'm going to bug the shit out of you then later. Because I never actually thought of Arma as a game to look at, because I don't know if they simulate their AI across map or they just put them to sleep. Like, I don't know what they do. So that might be something I need to look into. Is that all the questions?
Yeah, that's all we got really time for. We've gone over an hour.
Okay, you want to give the X show?
Yeah, I can give it. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming along and enjoying the podcast roll-up AMA thing. I'd like to thank Efren and Robert for being here with us. And I'd like to thank everyone who put their questions in the questions. We will catch you next time. And if you'd like to continue to support the development of Cepheus Protocol, then you can head over to the Patreon, and well, every dollar counts, really. Every dollar helps. And there is also a merch store. Don't quite have a link for that one. Haven't really had a look at it myself, so I'm not quite sure what's on there. So.
I think they're like random shirts and posters, designs, CERC stuff. We want to add some more going into closer to the campaign, but that'll be like later on because we really touch that store probably quarterly, if not every other couple of quarters. But yeah, if you guys want to find a way of supporting the team, you can do our Patreon, you can do our merch store, buy the anthology on Steam if you're interested in the story. We commissioned that as kind of like a teaser of the campaign to come. It's basically the first 12 chapters of the book. So the people here that are like lore fanatics, I love lore. So the book and the anthology are cool little collector's pieces if you want to like get ahead of what's coming in the campaign instead to come up with your own little theories of like what can be coming down the pipe. Especially for like when we get to the point of adding Fenrir, the PMC corporation. But yeah, that's pretty much everything there.
I completely forgot about that.
No, I dig it. But thank you guys so much for coming, and I hope to hear you guys' feedback. Please fill in. I'm going to post the feedback website on the channel for anyone that didn't get their question asked or feels like they have some good ideas and they want to put it there. People can vote on it. Ask your friends to vote on it. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming.